The views expressed on the following program are those of the hosts, callers, and guests, and are not necessarily those of WMEL staff, management, or advertisers.
This is Joe Steckler, folks, your host for Helping Seniors, the radio arm of Helping Seniors of Brevard County. We're going to have an interesting show today, and I highly recommend that you get that old pencil and paper ready to go. And while you're doing that, I'll do the little commercial part of the show and just remind everybody that our show is designed to help seniors. We want to help seniors and those who care for them by acting as a form of education, information, and connecting of people to resources. And having said that, I'll admit to you that I pulled the wrong gray briefing book out and put it in my briefcase to bring to the show today, so I'm going to have to ad-lib on my sponsors. I may forget a couple of my sponsors, but I'll make it up next week. And the reason I tell you that kind of stuff, folks, is because, heck, we're all human. And because we are all human, we need to pay attention to what I would like to say are informed sources that try to help us do a better job of planning our state, our legal planning, financial planning. There's a lot of good people out there that'll help you do things the right way. There are a heck of a lot of them out there that'll try to cheat you out of whatever you're trying to do. And Bill and I are going to talk about that a little bit today because there's some things going on in the system that simply are just not right. But I'd like to say that the first part of this show today is sponsored by WMEL, this radio station. Has been in our corner for a number of years. Bill Johnson, elder law attorney, who is my panelist today, and Bill is probably my longest-running panelist that's been on the radio and TV with me since we started this whole mess back in 2000. Bill's been with 13 years now.
Yep.
It's hard to realize that.
Long time, Joe.
It is a long time, but there's been a heck of a lot of good information that you put out for people. And I've never had a soul call me and tell me what you told them or the radio or on the TV is wrong. It's just not the way we do business. But there's a whole bunch of other people, and there are people like Senior Scene Magazine, Ebony News Today, Ren Care Medical Alert, Gentiva Healthcare, Bill Johnson, elder law attorney, Solid Bite Dental Implants, Spotlight Magazine, Hometown News. You see, folks, are all people that it's their job to try to do the very best they can to keep you informed. And I also have a commitment from Florida today that they will take selected articles from us that deal with things that are strictly important to seniors. And one of the things that's really important to seniors, I think, folks, is sort of the topic of today's show. And I just put a nickname on it, called it Elder Law. Elder Law, 4 June 2015. And one of the first things I'd like to build to talk about everybody today is impressing upon us all the need to understand the importance of legal documents. And trying to understand that, I asked Bill to do a special letter for the first issue of our newsletter that's going to come out in Senior Scene Magazine in July. That'll be an expanded 8-page newsletter. So Bill's got a column in there, and I asked Bill to pick what he thought was important. Why did you select durable power of attorney, Bill, as the thing you wanted to talk about in the first expanded newsletter?
Well, usually that's one of the first topics that comes up when somebody becomes incapacitated. The family members are all, either think they have a good power of attorney or don't have a power of attorney or need to get a power of attorney. And so there's a lot of, the area is kind of rife with problems because, that's one of those documents that people really try to save a nickel on, and they download it off the internet or they go down to one of these office supply stores and buy a form. And if you don't know anything about law, you may think you're covered, and then find out later when you go try to use this document that you really don't have any authority or any power that you thought you had.
Well, in the discussions you and I have had over durable power of attorneys over the years, Yeah. I think the most enlightening thing to me that would cause me to believe that the off-the-wall document wouldn't work is the fact that each power has to be delineated in the power of attorney. Once it's put in, it actually has to be initialed or signed off in a block on the form.
Well, you have to be specific. So if you don't specifically give somebody a power, they don't have it. So typically a Florida power of attorney done by an attorney is, somewhere like 12 pages long at least. So if you have a one-page power of attorney, go get a new one. That's all I can tell you, because that's not going to work. Secondly, there are certain powers now after October 1st, 2011, that you need to sign off or initial in the body of the document. There are powers such as changing beneficiaries, creating a trust, and doing things like that. However, those powers are very important for somebody to have if you're doing something like Medicaid planning, where we have to rearrange assets and, if one spouse is on Medicaid to pay the nursing home bill, the last thing we want is the other spouse's life insurance policy naming that patient spouse as the beneficiary. So we may need some way to change things like that, or perhaps we need the power to create a qualified income trust to make them eligible for Medicaid. So if those powers haven't been signed off on, the agent does not have those powers. And I've got several cases right now where we're going to have to do guardianships to get people the authority to sign off on these types of trusts. There also is some magic language that can be put in that makes it much easier to deal with banks and securities firms. But, and the other thing I find is nobody reads the document. They all think just because they have a document entitled Durable Power of Attorney, they can do everything. No, you can only do the powers that are given to you in that document. So you really need to read that document and become familiar with it.
Yeah. Bill, by doing these types of shows over the years, and we've been doing them now on the air since 2000. That's 15 years. I've learned an awful lot, and I've learned enough to know that I don't even have the knowledge that a practicing attorney gets just coming out of law school. I've been doing it a long time, but there's so many little ins and outs of the system that there's a reason why people go to law school. There's a reason why you have a bar examination. There's a reason why you do all this.
True, and like you were saying, you don't want to go to law school or practice for 20 years to know all this stuff. But at the same time, in what you do, Joe, you run across a myriad of circumstances where powers of attorney have gone wrong.
Yes.
I mean, between the both of us, we probably know hundreds of cases of children using a power of attorney to exploit a parent. Just one example there. So there's a lot of a lot of action around that one document.
Yeah. And, Bill, folks, over the years I've told you that Bill sends me a document whenever he gets these new bulletins that come up from the National Association of Elder Law Attorney. Bill passes those darn things to me, and I read them. And I've got 3 excerpts I made from the last bulletin Bill sent me. And it's apparent to me, Bill, that, people come to the state of Florida from all over, and what they think might be applicable, or what was applicable in the state they were in, is not applicable in the state of Florida. And that's all the more reason why people need, especially moving here from another state, need to go to a Florida attorney to verify that the legal documents they have are going to work for them.
Right, and a lot of the documents, Florida will recognize the documents from out of state if they were validly executed in the state you moved from. However, there may be an interpretation issue. Again, power of attorney being a good example. New York and Illinois, their power of attorney forms are one page long, and you just check a box off. Well, that works fine in Illinois or New York, but when you get to Florida, it's not specific enough. So that's just one example of how that can come into play.
Yeah, well, it showed me that in the recent bulletin you sent me there were several court cases, and I read the rulings, and while it had to do with estate planning and a couple of other things, that while the original filing by the attorney favored the claimant, but the lower or the upper courts reversed the ruling and then went back to have it adjudicated, and it turned out the original ruling held. I guess my point here is that if we go to attorneys that understand the law and they are doing what they should do for their client, then you stand a reasonable chance of not getting yourself into financial and legal and estate planning problems.
Correct. And it's not as, everybody thinks nowadays that you can get a form or you can read the statute and that's the end of it all. Well, if you don't know how to read case law and you don't know the real life applications or litigate in this area, you may not have the complete picture.
Well, a good case in point, folks. Bill and I have both been following a case of a client over the last several weeks, and this is one of the reasons why I like to think that what we're doing at Helping Seniors is pretty good. It helps people. So Kate gets calls at the office from people that are told something by maybe an estate planner, a financial planner, or a case manager for a home health care organization, and it prods them into doing something, and they pick up brochures that say, here's how to solve a problem, when in fact, all the stuff that they've been told and all the stuff they're doing is contrary to the law. And the case in point that I'm thinking about, and I'll let Bill talk about in just a second, this person went to a nursing home or a facility, picked a brochure up, was referred, and I'm not going to mention names, was referred to a financial planner. And that financial planner wanted to charge this person $8,000 to do something that if the man would have called the Elder Helpline at 800-963-5337, they would have started the process the right way. It wouldn't have cost them a blessed cent. Bill, can you add to what we're talking?
Yeah, I think there's two big points to make on this. One is that is why the Supreme Court took up the issue of the unlicensed practice of law last year, especially in the field of Medicaid planning, because people were getting taken for large sums of money by people who were not attorneys, promising to do all kinds of legal services. And the public was not there or knowledgeable enough to know what was and was not the unlicensed practice of law. And, the Supreme Court issued their opinion on some proposed rules by the Florida Bar that were generated after having public hearings on this issue. And, of course, they've been appealed, so we're still waiting on the determination from... Actually, there's been a motion for a rehearing, to see.
Okay.
That's point one. Point two is, in the area of veterans benefits, especially for a benefit called aid and attendance, it's illegal to charge somebody to do an application. So, there were multiple issues with this particular group.
Yeah.
And there was a lot of problems with that.
Yeah. So you might ask yourself, why in the world is Joe continuing, after a couple of shows over the air over the months, continuing to talk about this topic? Here's the reason, folks. It is because almost all the problems that Bill and I are talking about could have been averted if the right information had been disseminated to the people in the first place. And that goes back to whether or not a county should have a good plan for addressing senior issues, senior needs, in other words, a plan for aging. If you don't have a lead agency in a county trying to use the newspaper, the radio, the television, and all the forms of media that we have to do a good job of helping the people understand what is available to them so they could keep themselves out of trouble, we are just going to have more problems. And that's why I feel it's so important for Bill to help you understand that the legal system is not something to be afraid of. It's not to be afraid of, but Bill, if you're using it the right way. If you're trying to circumvent the system, yeah, you got all kinds of problems. But almost every problem you and I have talked about did not need to be a problem if, like, go back to the durable.
Well, let's talk about. Let's talk. In the particular case you were talking about, part of that fee was to get these people approved for VA aid and attendance.
Okay.
Most people probably don't know you can go get that application done for free out at the county. Each county in Florida has a veteran service team. Ours was located out in Building B in Viera, and you can look them up in the phone book under Brevard County. It'll say Veteran Service Team, and subsequently you just call them and they'll make an appointment and you can go in and see them and they will do the application for free. So why would you have to pay this particular person all this money to do something you can get for free?
Exactly right. And on the same side of the coin, we by people calling, helping seniors over the last several months, Kay has come across so many people just in the course of a conversation, Bill, that we find a lot of widows living on $800, $900, or $1,000 of Social Security money. They have no other benefits. That's it. And when Kay asks them if their husband had been in the service, most of the time, not all, but most of the time, the people say yes. So Kay says to them, are you aware there's a program called Aid and Attendance? These women do not know about it, Bill.
All right.
And we've been able to help these people get qualified for the aid and attendance, and that's in some cases as much as $1,711 additional on top of the $900 they've been living on. That's like becoming a millionaire overnight for people like that.
Yeah, you're talking about doubling or tripling their income.
Yeah.
Yeah, but they have to, let's let everybody know, it's available to the veteran or the unremarried widower of a veteran. There is an income and asset test and a medical test. You must be in need of somebody's aid and attendance for your care. So there are some components to that.
Yeah, but the components to the aid and attendance system are not nearly as stringent as the Medicaid system.
Correct. Medicaid, the requirement is you be at risk of nursing home placement, which means you basically have to be as bad as you would to go to a nursing home, whereas aid and attendance just says you need somebody's aid and attendance for your care, which is pretty much a fairly easy standard.
Okay, we're talking about this because we got 2 minutes before the break, and I want to get this out, see if we can answer this question. I have a person, income $1,400 a month, $12,000 in the bank. They rent a home. They have their own car. Are they, or how can they be made eligible for Medicaid? Should they be?
Well, if they have $12,000 in the bank, are they single?
Single.
Okay. Simply, they can. One way is spend down. Pay the money on their care till they get down to $2,000 in assets, and then apply. Another option would be they could do something called a personal services contract, where you pay a caregiver in advance for a certain number of hours a week in the future, and that brings you down. So there are a couple options. You could buy a prepaid burial or funeral contract as long as it's irrevocable.
Yeah. I guess it's a hard thing for me to understand. If a person has $12,000, I can't imagine being in that situation where I would have $1,400 a month income and have no other resource other than $12,000 in the bank to help me in case I got in trouble. But the rules are the rules. So I tried to advise this person that she said, well, why do I have to go back?
Let's talk about that for a second, because I just read a story on the internet by a legitimate news organization, a business type thing, that basically said 25% of people aged 55 or older have zero retirement savings. Zero. The other people who do have savings for retirement, the average is $104,000.
And this
just let that sink in for a second.
Yeah, and this woman has $12,000. And, so many times we get the thing thrown in our face, well, why didn't they save more? We're up against the break, but I'll quickly say this. The woman worked in the Florida education and retirement system for 20-plus years. She averaged roughly $500 a month less than $500 a month when she started, and her total retirement and pension today is $1,400. She worked, she tried, she doesn't want anything for free. We're going to take a quick break, folks. We'll come back on the other side, and we're going to talk about the current Medicaid mess in Tallahassee, because it does affect you whether you want to think about it or not. You need to know what Bill and I are going to talk about, so stay with us.
AM 1300 WMEL.
This is Joe Steckler, folks. We're on for the second half of Helping Seniors, radio arm of Helping Seniors of Brevard County. The job of Helping Seniors is to inform, educate, and connect seniors to sources and resources and people that can help them. I forgot to give you the phone number for the office and the phone number for the radio station if you want to call us. First number for the radio station is 631-1300 if you have a question for Bill or me. Secondly, if you have a question for Kay at the office, if you want to call and find out about what Bill and I are talking about, call 473-7770, 473-7770. I went back and did a little hasty, rapid mental calculation, and I determined that the sponsors I neglected to mention for the first part of the show are the following: RenCare Medical Alert System, Seniors Helping Seniors, Levin Home Care, Woodstock Hospital System, Canadian Medications, and Peaceful Beach Mediation. And I'll just mention Peaceful Beach Mediation today. It's a program run by Brooke Goldfarb. She's a Harvard Law graduate, and she tries to get seniors together instead of letting them go through a divorce. And she tries to do this through mediation and talking to each other. So it's just something we're trying to do better, a little bit differently, and I think it's just it's like we have to do the same type of thing with this Medicaid system we're talking about, and that's something that Bill and I are going to talk about the second part of the show, because I think it's, and you might ask yourselves, and you might be wondering, well, why, as I said earlier, why Joe keep continuing to harp on this? Well, in that NALA bulletin that Bill sent me, there are two things that really triggered something for me. And one of them was what new managed care regulations will mean for frail elders. Now, managed Medicare, Medicaid stuff, folks, is exactly what's happening in Tallahassee as we sit here talking to you on radio. Medicaid expansion, Medicaid increases, and what you don't know is what points out on that NALA, and I'll read exactly 2 sentences. Federal regulations are finally catching up with a decade of seismic change in the delivery of Medicaid services. More than 650 pages of proposed new rules are aimed at overseeing managed care, which has become the standard health care delivery system for low-income adults and children, and is now being expanded to include both medical care and long-term support and services for older adults and younger people with disabilities. We're talking, folks, about the 800,000 people that the Senate and the House are arguing about on how they're going to insure them. What is not being told to you is that in the current Florida budget, I have the pie chart in front of me here from Representative Tobias's office, is that the bill is $20 billion. That's 40% Florida, 60% federal. They are trying to increase that amount to $33 billion. Where in the world are we going to use the extra $13 billion? Because that doesn't even address the expansion program that Florida declined to take from the federal government, nor does it talk about the different changes in long-term care. And this is why Bill and I both believe it's important for more of us to understand what is and what is not happening in a Medicaid managed care system. You know, the fix bill, I don't think, is throwing more money at the problem. I think the fix might be better addressed by, in a nice way, telling our Senate and House of Representatives in the state of Florida that there's a lot to this thing that you're not talking about. When you changed the law 3 years ago, you put the fox in the hen house. When you took away the managed care from nonprofit organizations that were trying to do the very best they could, and directed all that money to go to 11 HMOs who are profit-oriented in the state of Florida. And that's one of the reasons why you get these clients like the one we were talking about before the show. This is why people are not getting the right information on how to apply for all these systems. What is your comment?
Well, this is an example of privatization. And we're trying to privatize all these things and pass the money on to all these HMOs in the hopes that they do a better job than the government did with this money. And part of the privatization, at least of the long-term care program, was that, or the theory behind it was going to save us all this money. And if we went this route, we wouldn't have to pay all this money out for Medicaid. We were going to save dollars. And I think what you're seeing is exactly the opposite, is it's actually costing more. If you recall back to when they initiated Medicare Part C,
right,
which is now called the Choice or Advantage plans, that this was going to be an alternative where the premiums were going to be picked up partially or wholly by the HMOs, and that you would then have to go to a preferred provider network, and this was all going to save Medicare money. Remember that?
I remember.
Yeah, and in fact, for every dollar that's spent through regular Medicare, there is $1.25 spent through a Choice or Advantage plan. It ended up costing the taxpayers 25% more money, and actually has led to the sped up, or the speeding up of the running out of money in the Medicare pot.
Yeah, but what people don't want to, maybe they just don't see it, Bill, is that neither Medicare nor Medicaid are free. Either you're going to pay for it at the state level or the federal level. Somebody's going to pay those costs.
Correct.
No, let's say if an assisted living facility costs $4,000, and a person was on Medicaid, was under the Medicaid managed care program, like we had it before the legislature changed it, and an organization that managed the money got $1,400 for the person's care, and they said, okay, I need $200 to manage and do the case management, but I can put $1,200 into that person's care. And the person was getting $1,400 Social Security. So now you've got $2,400. You got to find maybe another $1,200 someplace from a family or something to put that person in assisted living. That was a way to make the system work. But what do? We changed the whole system. And in front of me, I've got an Agency for Healthcare Administration, ACA brief, that was given here in Melbourne a month and a half ago. And one of the slides on there said that if you take that person that you're trying to get in an assisted living facility and put them in a nursing home at a cost of $4,500 or $5,000 a month. We can keep them there for 60 to 90 days. At the end of that time, since the cost is so high, we need to give them to a less costly element of care. So now, after having tried to do that system where that financial planner on the first part of the show wanted $8,000 to help a person get this, we've got all kinds of agencies and people trying to make a profit to get the people to do these things, and we're just defeating ourselves, Bill.
Right, because just like in my Medicare example, when you start putting the profit margin in there, that people can make a profit off this, people figure ways around the rules. And one of the ways around the waiting list for Medicaid services is if you have a 60-day stay in a nursing home. So if I put somebody in a nursing home, apply for Medicaid, now I put the state on the hook for 2 months in a nursing home, and then I transition them out into an assisted living facility. And then what happens on top of that is that rate that the state was paying the nursing home, which could be $7,000, $8,000, that instead goes to the HMO, who's forking out part of the bill for the assisted living facility, and then they get to bank all the rest of that money for a year. So if I had somebody with $2,000 in income, they are probably going to be on the hook, the HMO, to the assisted living for another $1,500. But if I put that person in a nursing home first for 2 months, get the state to pick up that tab, which amounts to about $12,000, then we transition them back out into the assisted living. They skip the waiting list. Then the HMO, who is doing the long-term care services, will be able to get that $6,000 a month, and their only bill to the assisted living is $1,500, so they get to bank $4,500 every month for a year. Now, how that saves the state money, I don't know.
I don't know either, and that's part of the problem. There are so many ways to milk the system to certain persons or people's advantage, and that goes back to the reason. That's one of the reasons why. Well, go ahead.
Well, let's talk about the Medicare Advantage or choice plans. That was supposed to save Medicare money because your premiums would be getting paid by somebody else. That saved you some money, and then you would be put into an HMO with a preferred provider network, and that would help save or save the state money by doing that. What in reality happened was it made them capture patients and then trying to do as many procedures as they possibly could and get the money from Medicare. And so subsequently, you were getting more services than you needed because they were able to capture the patient and bill Medicare for more stuff. So the privatization in this field doesn't really work that well.
Okay. This question is directed to you, listener. How confused are you right now by what Bill and I are talking about? I would imagine, for the most part, you are confused because it is a very complex topic. I had somebody in a room with me the other day listening to me talk to somebody in the elder helpline system. When I asked the questions, the phone caller was rude, condescending, and they talked about my case and compared it to making peanut butter sandwiches. Well, what the hell did making peanut butter sandwiches have to do with me understanding what she was trying to tell me about getting on Medicaid? I was asking some specific questions about any kind of free services I could get. And the reason I do that is because I want to find out what these people are telling the callers. The callers are confused. The callers are older. The callers need help. They hurt. Now, everything that Bill and I are talking about today, folks, you can go to a good elder law attorney, and he can direct you to the right source to get help. Some cases it may cost you some money. In some cases, It's free. It's just like when Bill gives an initial consultation. If he sees that you need what the state offers free, he's going to direct you there. But if he sees that you need estate planning, if you need guardianship, that's the time to make that kind of stuff happen, isn't it, Bill?
Correct.
So,
well, the key, as we always say on this show, is educating yourself.
Education, right? And that's why I want so much for people to understand that what is being debated in Tallahassee right now is extremely important. It's important because the other thing that Bill sent me from the National Association of Elder Law Attorneys had to do with the new rules. Insurance rules are going to take effect under Medicaid managed care, and the cost of insurance, the National Association of Elder Law Attorneys is projecting that cost of insurance could increase by as much as 20% this year.
I don't think that's Medicaid. I think that's Obamacare.
Obamacare. I'm sorry. You're right. I apologize. It was under the Affordable Care Act. But it's going to be at least 10%. So when we're arguing in Tallahassee, as we are today, about Medicaid expansion and how we're going to pay for insurance, it's extremely important because we all pay for these costs. All of us, whether you're on a fixed income or not, are going to pay taxes. So if we don't get this right, it's going to hurt people. And this is why I think it's so important for all of us to understand, and that's one of the reasons why I write the articles for the newspaper and for Hometown News, and when I get into these legal things, folks, I just don't write that article and send it out. I generally send it over to Bill, let Bill dumb check me to make sure that I've said the right thing, because I value his opinion as an attorney. That's why I keep encouraging more of you to seek out attorneys that you trust, that you like, that can give you good advice. And, Bill, as long as you've been in this business, and am I wrong, or am I beating a dead horse to death here by what we're talking about?
No, I don't believe so. I mean, if you don't bring it up, who will?
That's a good point. And along that line, I've got one article written, folks, and I'm trying to figure out whether to release it or not. But as I said to somebody, if I don't have the courage to put what I know is wrong on a piece of paper and send it to somebody so somebody else can read, then I'm doing you and myself a disservice, because I have to live with that failure to act on what I believe is right. A couple of weeks ago, we talked about elder abuse, and I promised that I would give you the number for the elder abuse helpline, and I've got the number here. It's an 800 number, but I want you to take it down, because what we're talking about in terms of Medicaid applications, and if people that are not attorneys are trying to practice law, they, in effect, Bill, I think they're performing sort of a form of elder abuse, because they're leading people down a primrose path in the wrong direction. Right or wrong?
It can end up in a very bad situation, yes. Yeah.
So that becomes elder abuse. And here's the number, folks. It's an 800 number, 962-2873, 962-2873, or 866-677-1116. And if you can't get through to them, call Kay over at 473-7770, and she'll help you. And here's another number that I really want all of you to have. There's two numbers. One is the number for the Elder Helpline, and it's simply just a number that you need to have. And that number is it's an 800 number, 1-800-963-5337. 1-800-963-5337. And that number for people that live in Brevard County rings over in Orlando at the Senior Resource Alliance. It used to be over here. But when the state had to cut back some of their funding, they consolidated these phones. And that's when they took the personal equation out of this thing and made us all talk to phones, which I don't like. But if you have a problem, my recommendation to you would be to call the Elder Helpline or call Kay so she can get you pointed in the right direction. On the terms of elder abuse and scams and stuff, Bill, I always like it if you have a comment about what people should do, what they shouldn't do, and you always usually have some pretty good advice. What's your advice today on scams and elder abuse? What to do and what not to do?
One thing you should probably do is lock down your credit rating. If you can do that through a variety of services, like LifeLock is one of them, but you should put your credit score under lock so that anytime somebody has to access it, they call you first and get your permission. That prevents somebody taking out a loan or a credit card in your name without your knowledge. So that's your tip for the day.
And I'll add a tip to that, what he's thinking. One time in my life, I had somebody that did that to me, and I had 5 credit cards taken out of mine and my wife's name that we didn't know about until we checked the credit report thing. That's when we found out about it. That's an awful realization, Bill.
And how long did it take you to fix that problem?
I never did fix it.
It's still going today, correct?
It's still going today.
Yeah.
I've been living with that for something like 9 years. And I tried Sheriff's Department in Brevard County, Florida, Sheriff's Department in another state, a governor's office, local law enforcement. Not a blessed thing works. Nothing.
So it's better not to get in that situation and lock it down than to try and deal with the aftermath.
And if somebody sends you an email saying you've won $1, delete it. It just simply doesn't happen, folks. The other thing that I was looking about, there are changes that are coming to Medicaid, folks, and the more we understand the changes to Medicaid, and I think the big change people need to think about, Bill, is like the one lady I recommended that you go ahead and get her Medicaid card. It's a lot better to get that card ahead of time, isn't it?
Well, you have to still be eligible for it.
Right,
so, yeah.
But if you can get eligible now,
right,
you might as well.
Well, like I was telling you, that report that came out with 55 and older Americans, how much they have in the bank. If the average is $104,000 and 25% of all of them have no savings, there are going to be a lot of people on Medicaid.
Okay. Thank you, Bill. Thank you for listening today. Do pay attention to what comes out in Hometown News, and because pretty soon we will have the results of our advocacy council, who has put together the recommendations to the county commissioners to develop an aging plan for Brevard County. And if you want to take the survey and be part of the information process, call Kay at the office at 473-7770 or go to our elder website, helpingseniors.brevard.org. Take the survey and be part of the solution and not the problem. So thank you for listening to us today, and watch our TV shows. Be with you next week. Have a great weekend. Bye-bye.